I'm really happy to present John Beltran, world-renowned electronic music producer and a DJ, label owner. You name it, he does it. How you doing today, John?
Good. Thanks for having me, Tim.
Oh man, it's great to have you as well. You know,
Yeah.
we talk a lot, but it seems like lately we've been talking so much about things that are non music related, like relationships and sports and everything like that. But it's nice to get a chance to talk with you about music.
Yeah, this is great. Well, we've talked our share of music as well over the years. So,
True, true.
yep.
So I guess we'll do this in three parts if that's all right. I just want to get people get to know your background, and I have some questions for your kind of history in the I guess early '80s through the early '90s, and then of course it's a music channel, so I picked a few songs I'd like you to speak about, and
Okay.
I'll kind of play them as well, so we can kind of have a musical break, and
Hmm.
then the last part is we'll get a chance to see what you're up to and your new label and your future with music, and then some random questions about just the music going on today, techno and stuff like that, and the state of music today. So
That sounds good. Let's
we'll get
roll.
into all
Yep.
that.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So, kind of going back to your early '80s, who was your kind of musical influences that kind of got you into music?
Yeah. Well, my father was big into music in the '70s. Well, he's a music guy. So there's a lot of records in the house, um, a lot of Latin records. And my mother was also into things like Earth, Wind, and Fire and um, kind of soul thing. And they're both grew up in the they were young in the '60s and '50s, so that music kind of um, colored our household. My sisters, I just have one sister and one sibling, sister, younger sister, a couple of years younger than me, and she was an avid record collector. I wasn't. I just stole all her records. I basically would just loot her, and it bugged her. But I mean, she laughs about it now. But I would literally run in her room, take her records, and go listen to these records in the basement or whatever. So she was really. It's funny. She played a big role in the '80s. To your question about or as far as a taste, whether it be having Smith's albums, Propaganda, which you and I have talked about. She bought all these records. She's part of a record club, so she would get all these tapes and records um, delivered to the house. And she's gonna love this that she even mentioned this. So it's time she gets her due. Man, yeah, I could. We loved Duran Duran in our, when I was, seventh, eighth grade. Oh, that was kind of the introduction to kind of alternative or new wave as kids, because we were kids, there was no being really cool about it. We were just kids, and this music was on MTV, and we were all, had access and kind of exposed to it, right, Tim? So, yeah, I mean, that was the early stuff, and it was all kind of synth music, that was that really resonated with me on MTV. So whether it be Devo or um, and later on Depeche Mode and um, even New Order was pretty big later in high school. But like I said, those formative years were Duran Duran, Ultravox. We've spoken about. Um, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I love the Eurythmics, any of the stuff that was on MTV, and those were really, really, really great songs too. To me, that was popular music. It wasn't about being underground or anything. That was popular music, but we were exposed to synthesizers. Gary Newman was my first. Cars was my first record I ever bought. 45 of it as a kid at the mall and going into those, mall record stores. It was quite the. It was amazing, and it really that music, that song, and that music is really what activated love for synth music.
Oh, that's awesome. I talk a lot about it on my channel because I'm the youngest of four kids too, and how important my siblings were. It seemed like each one of them had their own
I'm
taste.
older, but I'm older. My younger sister,
Oh shoot, that's right. Yeah,
you know,
jeez.
that's the cool angle
So
there.
so she was super hip then.
Super hip, still is.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's so important for siblings and friends to kind of give you that influence of different music that's out there.
Yeah.
Outside of your family, was you have like friends and like maybe radio stations
Yeah,
and outside influence? You mentioned
yeah, I
MTV
just
as
kind of had a
well.
thought when you were talking about that, about, friends or family influencing. Like my friends, they were into good music. I guess they were into like breakdancing and stuff. And that was in those years that I'm talking about, the seventh, eighth grade, 13, 14. Um, and I brought the more alternative thing to them through my sister. So, um, I loved it all. I mean, we did, like I said, we were breakdancing at that time. But I remember bands like Art of Noise, like beatbox was one of the main um, dance tunes that we would dance to, or people would dance to. Kraftwerk, all of Kraftwerk's music, Numbers was a big one, right? Um, so we started to kind of blend their tastes. I started to blend their taste with my sister's taste, and I never really thought about it this way. But I guess that was those were influential. But like I said, I brought the alternative side to my friends, and they brought the kind of, you don't want to call Kraftwerk mainstream, but at the time for breakdancing, it was like,
Yeah.
it was club music, it was Boogie Down Bronx, all those kind of songs. It's Time by Nucleus. That was underground in its essence, New York underground kind of electro thing, African Bambata and stuff. But it was accessible, wasn't it? Right. So it wasn't like nowadays where you have to dig for, the good stuff, or even in the 90s, you dug for the real deal stuff, right? We were handed this stuff somehow, some way.
That's awesome. Yeah, you got me kind of thinking about early influences too, and man, I was so influenced by early electro and early hip hop and especially early freestyle. You must have, I know
Amazing.
maybe Michigan wasn't a hot spot for freestyle like New York, Miami, and California was, but you must have gone through heard a lot of great freestyle music, like in the '82 to even Shannon, all the
Yes,
way
well, that was part of
through.
the breakdance thing too, like the
Yeah.
Shannon track, and these are all like, different scenes that were all kind of in the breakdancing scene collectively. Prince was huge, Minneapolis stuff, coming across to Detroit. Our like our teen clubs had like, or the DJs had the best music because the Midwest was, firing on all cylinders with that kind of stuff, and even like from your neck of the woods, Egyptian Lover, that blended into um, the whole kind of growth of the scene, and as far as that kind of music and dancing and and being in those teen clubs and stuff like that.
Awesome. Sweet.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, like when was the first time you started hearing about house music and techno? When do you think that was
yeah,
about roughly?
yeah. I think probably late in high school, late years in the late '80s. But I would say really, I can't think of a moment, but I know after high school is when um, a couple friends brought like, mixtapes to me, which that's not totally true. So there were mixtapes that the Wizard was doing, Jeff Mills was doing when I was in high school, and even the breakdancing days. I moved on from that, went hardcore into alternative music through my high school years. So I was into more guitar type, something The Cure and things like that. So, but I got back into the machine stuff with Depeche Mode, and that led into Skinny Puppy. That led into industrial stuff, and then that led me to Detroit, which is freaking next door. But that some of those mixtapes would have Cybertron next to Kraftwerk, right next to Egyptian Lover, and so this thing started to really blend in the late '80s for me. And when I got out of high school, and would go to parties or whatever, people that had mixtapes or things like that, that stuff really intrigued me. And then I would finally go research where the hell this sound is coming from. And at the time, the Detroit thing, you mentioned house music and techno or whatever, was never really big into quote house music. Still am not. House was never my thing. Love it. I mean, I think it's great, but it was always the more industrial side of dance music that was my thing.
And that's really the difference between Chicago house and Detroit techno, or even
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah.
There was some great Chicago stuff. Mr. Fingers, Larry Heard is a hero. But I always think of his "Can You Feel It?" That stuff had a very um, uh, techno feel to me, even though it was more quote soulful and maybe jazzier, jazz chords, right, things like that. In comparison to Derek May, Cybertron, Kevin, it still had the same gear. It had the 808, or excuse me, the 909, that particular track, Junos, square bass, right? So these were a blend of musical kind of vibes with the same gear. Now that's where I really got into like um, um, the kind of darker sound. Your Love by Jamie Principle. That is, I found that out years later, but that led the way for sure. If we're going to talk history, but man, I jumped in right on that Detroit thing, and that "Can You Feel It, Mr. Fingers" thing was part of the deal when you got into Detroit. They just kind of fit together.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that because I mean we're kind of roughly the same age, and because I was already really into electro, which was always very futuristic. You think of like Planet Rock and stuff like that.
Yep.
When I started to hear like house music in like 86, 87, to me it didn't really grab me as much because it felt like an extension of disco.
Mhm.
And disco, to me, I liked it. I grew up on it. I feel like I'm a disco baby, but it didn't necessarily resonate with me as much until the late 90s or middle 90s when I started to hear more deep house and like you mentioned Larry Heard like his solo stuff and all the great music of the deep house, but like techno seems so much more futuristic and more in line with the new wave and industrial influences I had. It seemed like that was kind of like that with you a little too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love disco, but I was a kid. I was like a little kid, so it was
Yeah.
popular disco, right? I love the Bee Gees to this day. I mean, they're one of my favorite bands. I'm not going to pretend to that I knew like the really cool underground disco. I listen to a lot of it now, and I play a lot of this stuff out now, edits and things that are the real deal stuff. But we didn't grow up with that. Literally, did not. We're not exposed to that. So. But I love disco, and yes, it was the house scene sounds more like disco, um, but it was like by the time I was getting into dance music post high school and get serious about it, yes, the more kind of the futuristic stuff resonated with me way more than the kind of sexy and deep soulful thing, which I'm a soulful guy. I loved Yarborough and Peoples, had that records, loved plenty of Stevie Wonder growing up and all that. So that's not the issue. But when it came to electronic music, I was really affected by this kind of dark industrial sound.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that seems like it was really tied to the I mean specifically like the radio station like with Jeff Mills and just that whole Detroit aura kind of going around. How much do you feel like that music was really influenced by, you know, Detroit city and the car industry and the futuristic kind of feel of the city that
Well,
kind of.
Yeah, the Detroit people will tell you it did.
Yeah.
I can't. I live in Detroit now, um, and it's a different time. This is an entirely different world in comparison compared to those what those guys grew up in, and I think a lot of it wasn't just the sounds of factories. I mean, there was a lot of despair and there was a lot of serious issues in Detroit. There has been for a long time in Detroit. So yeah, I mean, like the the decay and that they speak of, and that was a real deal. Even when I would come down here from my small town, Lansing, Michigan, little college town, if you don't know, where Michigan State is. So I grew up in a pretty chill college city, and to come down here, you saw it, you felt it. No, that wasn't the first thing that I would go home and just when I wanted to make music, like that was it was all about the music. It was the clubs. It was it was the energy that these dudes brought. These DJs, and they effing brought it, dude. I'm just telling you. I've told these stories to other people from Europe or people that didn't get a chance to experience these things, and people have experienced things in New York City. They've experienced them in Chicago, the early house stuff. But I'm telling you, the Detroit thing a was a monster.
And you're talking like Richie Hawtin and John
Yeah, of
Aquaviva.
course, yeah, well, yeah, more so. Richie's night at the shelter was a thing, for sure. But I'm talking more Blake Baxter at the Majestic. Now you have this kind of what we knew later to be kind of this British big room vibe, right? When they dropped Cubic, right, by 808 State, the way a place would just explode. Now there were smaller, more intimate places where, like a guy like Mark Kinchin would play at a place called Wax Fruit. To me, that was, man, you got the real deal, man. He would drop like Suburbanites, art of stalking, something like that. And it was just like, where the f am I right now? You're seriously, it was a mind blower. But like I said, the big room of the Majestic, where it was more, they had the tight sound system at Wax Fruit and places like it, right? You could just hear the thump. At the Majestic, it's got that big reverb, right? Thing. Jesus Love the Acid would come on, and the whole place would just like collapse, right? People going nuts. And it had more of that, what I would imagine the British thing. You wear a hoodie with a baseball cap. It became that kind of thing too, as well, mixed with that kind of French noir thing of the techno guys and their black frame glasses and their black turtlenecks. There was a blend of that in the Majestic. I don't think I've ever really kind of spoken about that to anyone where where it was kind of documented, that blend. But that was the feel at the Majestic, and it was but like I said, they'd play the sick Chicago or Detroit kind of minimal shit too that would really blow up the crowd as well.
Nice. Yeah, I find Detroit just a fascinating city. Everything from the architecture to the history to the riots to to the post dystopian, just the whole resurgence of the city. And I just find it really fascinating. I've seen so many documentaries on Detroit in the last 10, 15 years. I just find it fascinating. Plus I have some ties there too. My grandfather worked at Ford Hospital in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
And strangely enough, my brother works for Ford as well. And yeah, I just have a lot of ties to Detroit, not only from just the music, but I just find that the city fascinating in so many ways.
Yeah, it's great. It's great living here in I'm a father and I'm 55 years old. So it's nice to be able to bring my son. My son is with me and his mother share time. So, but when I do have him here, it's nice that the city is kind of going, in the right direction. It's safer. There's things to do with my boy, just going downtown to get a slice, or over the holidays going down and enjoying the amazing downtown Christmas environment, as well as the sports teams are blowing up big time. All four teams, the Red Wings, the Lions, the Tigers, and the Pistons are all like ascending. It's a really great time to be in Detroit in a different time. And this is, I'm excited to be here now. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, and you guys have some strong food culture going on with the food
Yeah. A
trucks and
lot of
everything
good,
like
lot
that.
of good food. Yeah.
You guys got some nice stuff going on in the
Yep.
culture of food for sure.
Yep. A lot of good food. There's always been good food here. But definitely people are moving here for the food for sure,
Nice.
and starting new things for sure.
Oh, cool. So kind of transitioning to your kind of start with music equipment. We're before I ask you about your early setup and your first gear, was being part of the cassette culture and that generation of getting that hands on of recording cassettes, and was cassettes a big kind of like transition into like equipment and kind of that first recording feel? Like what was kind of that spark that kind of got you into looking at equipment, or was it just the music side?
That's funny. Well, so in that era, that time that I talked about the Gary Newman thing, right? And kind of discovering records and taking my sister's records and all that stuff. And there was a place called Marshall Music. It's still in Lansing. It's different now, but it was in this really cool kind of what strip mall, almost like an outdoor mall like you see nowadays, but it was more mid-century kind of uh, type of buildings, kind of flat top glass along the whole sides of the hallways. Right now, a lot of these kind of shopping centers, you walk outside to the store. These you were inside in these really nice, this really cool like walking shopping mall, but it was very linear, long. Like I said, with the glass where the parking lot was outside of the glass. Anyways, there was a place called Marshall Music, and they had all of the top synth gear. They had synthesizers, and you could go in there and play it, but they were depended on the guy that was working who would let you play. If you Because I was younger, I was probably like 13, and just kind of moseying around in there. You could buy records there too, which is cool. So I'd maybe buy a record. My dad would give me some money. I'd go in there and buy a record, but ride my bike over there, and but then I got to play on the synths. If the right guy was like, "Yeah, you can play," some guys were just like, "No," because it was younger and they don't want to. It was weird. Nowadays at Guitar Center or something, they let everybody hammer on that thing. So would I would just got into playing on and they were analog synths at the time, just plain and simple. There were knobs, and I remember seeing those same kind of keyboards in the Gary Newman Cars video. They were very front and center, if you remember, right? There were like three on the stage, and there was Gary Newman in front, and then his guys and a drummer, I think. So the whole idea, the whole synth thing was born not just from the music, as you were just asked, but literally, what are these freaking things? I mean, when I think of it, it's one of the. As I get older, I'm less nostalgic, and I was always a very nostalgic person. It's one of the things I can think about that actually I feel it again. What it felt like to walk into that and like marvel and want one of those things so bad. Now my dad got an organ, pretty pretty lame in comparison, but it was something. We had this organ in our home, and it had little beats. It had the kind of bossa nova beats and things like that, right?
Yeah, the
The or,
polka.
the old organ beats. So
Yeah.
um, I got into playing on that thing, and I was one of the first songs I learned was Rush's Rush Subdivisions by Rush. The dun 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 dun, and I started learn that, and then I learned to play the melody with it, the top part of that. Um, and there it was. I think I was kind of hooked on on the possibility is, wow, I really like doing this and that. I want more of this. I want more gear. Um, but by the time I got out of high school, I borrowed a couple keyboards from some friends, one from my cousin and one was a Casio, and um, one was a Techniques keyboard, Tim. We can research it. I forgot what it was called. I can look it up, but I don't want to get going off on a search here. It was a silver 61 key um, Techniques keyboard. It had its beats in there as well. It had
Wow.
those kind of the same sounding kind of had bossa nova beat, and there was a disco beat, and that disco beat is the one I would always use. I think there were two in it, and I would basically just use that disco beat as my house beat because I didn't have a drum machine. I was probably like I would say it's like in 1989 is when I started this little project, and then like I said, I borrowed a Casio from a friend. So I had this beat going with this thing, and I would play on the Casio bass lines or whatever, and I think one of the first songs I was really inspired by to like kind of copy was "It Is What It Is" by Derek May. Um, if you want to maybe play that somewhere in your editing, do it because it was a monster inspirational thing for me. Simple and the mood that I was really feeling.
Which song was that?
It is what it is.
Oh yeah, yeah, I love that song. I got the record. And
There, yeah, I see you have the record. So um, well, there was first of all there was that Detroit techno compilation that had techno music by Juan Atkins and Ride 'Em Boy. I think it was by Folks. I think.
was that Relic?
No, no, no. This is it was called the Detroit Sound of Detroit Techno, and it was a gatefold.
Oh, okay. Well, I gotcha. Okay,
Okay, do you
gotcha.
know the record?
Yeah, yeah.
So that one was like that was it. That was the beginning. That's after the Depeche Mode and the industrial thing. That's the record that said no, this is what you're into. Period. I didn't listen to anything else after that, other than trying to find these records. But to answer your question, yes, I got a what's it called, a 4-track tape recorder, and started to make tapes started to make tracks. I would record um, that long disco beat, crank up the BPMs a little bit, and then I would do a bass line, and then I would do melodies or whatever. And I had these simple. I wish I had those tapes, but I do these simple house techno grooves. Felt more housey with a disco beat, right?
Mhm.
So then I would just record those to tape. So I would record output to the from this track recorder into my cassette player, and I had tapes of just tracks of mine. And I think those tapes are probably still in my dad's at my parents' house in some box. Yeah, I've seen you lighten up, like find those, right? So that's probably what I should do. But that was my first step into gear, and then the next step was my father co-signed for me to get a new VFX, a what's called an Ensoniq VFX, along with a new Hyundai IBM compatible computer, and those were the two things. I got Cakewalk installed on the computer and had this MIDI kind of interface, and that was my first go at the at having my own gear, and it started from there.
Nice, nice. It's funny you mentioned the my grandmother had a organ when I was probably like 5 or 6, and it had yeah, it had the polka, the rock, the bossa nova button,
Yeah, yeah.
and then I don't know if yours had this too, but you could pull out a little bottom like little keyboard thing, and it played like these really dark notes. It was like this, I don't know, it was just, I was fascinated by these dark notes, and I would play these dark tones because that would really bring out the bass of the speaker that was in the organ. And yeah, I'd play to like a rock beat, or I think they had waltz on it, and
Yeah, that's what we kids did, right? So,
that's
you know,
funny.
you should have stayed with it.
That's funny. Yeah, it's funny when you hear stuff like that, how it just kind of fuels your brain for wanting to hear different music and find your type of music like that you were looking for. Even though you were starting to make music, you're still kind of looking to see kind of combine that with what you're hearing out there.
Yeah, I always thought that I had a pretty good that I was, because let's be honest, the stuff that was coming out of Chicago and some of the stuff, and just let's say electronic music at the time, when you listen to like a little more um, kind of advanced music, which I still did, I still listened to, you grew up on all kinds of different things. I knew that it wasn't the most musical, outstanding, productions, and I was really close. I felt like I was like those guys were only using a few pieces of gear themselves, right? They just were funky, and they had the balls to go and do it, right? Press up records or whatever it was. These guys, you know, stopped whatever they were doing. I think Derek and those guys all went to school at Eastern Michigan, and they stopped what they were doing. Maybe I don't know if they graduated or not, but they had the balls to do this thing, right? And that's all it really was. I mean, I felt like I heard it and I go, I can do that. And that's all it takes for any young musician or producer. If you hear things and that's you just feel like you want to add your take on the whole thing, and that's the initial that's the initial thought process, right? So I continue to just get better and to the point where I started turning some heads, whether it be in my crew, and then ultimately when I gave my demos to guys in Detroit.
All right, so you got all the equipment there with the cakewalk and 4-track recorder, keyboards. Sounds like your dad was definitely supporting you there. What kind of
Yes.
led to your first recording, like with I guess aquatic with the open house? Like how did that lead to that?
So I had kind of done a few things before leading up to aquatic that weren't up to snuff. I mean, like there's a process like we were just talking about that that was getting better, right? But I kind of nailed it with and sometimes that's how it is as a writer, as a producer, whatever, a composer, whatever you do. Not everything's the same level. Not everything's going to affect people the same way. It's just there's geniuses that have written lesser songs, right? So the idea was I finally kind of nailed this chord progression on aquatic, and I it was with that keyboard I'm telling you, the Ensoniq, and I never had those sounds before with the previous setup that I told you about. The kind of one I kind of messed with for a year or so, the techniques and the Casio. So the quality was another level. Um, so I nailed it with this chord change. That was very similar to "Can You Feel It, Mr. Fingers," or maybe even some like Baby Ford stuff. They were primarily jazz cluster chords, and then so I did for me the most kind of logical thing was to use a square bass, similar to Baby Ford or Larry Heard. So there, I started making the connection to these records. My music started to sound the level of these records, the composition, like I said, the chord progression, which I ran into, which is how it worked for me. Ran into these chords, just wrote pretty good at writing bass lines, pretty simple bass lines, not very melodic, but I usually get right in the pocket with my bass lines historically. And that record of that song really started to kind of sound, like I said, sound like legit. I recorded it to tape and took it down, and I played it for the guys in Detroit. I gave it to Shakir, Anthony Shakir, and a Shake, as they call him, and he was blown away. and he's like, I'm going to get this to some people. I'm going to first. I didn't give him the tape. Sorry, I played it for him at this record store, and he was here. I'm gonna. What's your number? I'm gonna get you in line with Carl Craig. Carl Craig is starting a new label called Retroactive, and I was like, cool. And I played it for Carl over the phone, and Carl said, I want it.
Mhm.
So that was the first um, kind of feeling of like, man, street cred. Like these dudes are feeling me, right?
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, and then retroactive proceeded to he and Damon Booker proceeded to put it all together, and ultimately it licensed to Buzz Records
Yeah.
in Belgium. So like all immediately, my first release um, is a street hit. I mean, people were just blown away by it, and I just added some of my things that was into, new age and things like that. That with the whale stuff, the whale, and
Yeah.
some of my kind of social um, kind of opinions at the time. I was very into the environment and things like that. So yeah, and there was Aquatic, and ultimately, and Carl did a rework of it as well. So
Yeah.
there's two versions on the retroactive record.
Yeah. Yeah, I got a copy up here, as you can see.
Nice. Yeah, there's the Buzz. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
the OG one.
yeah, yeah, yeah. What's
Nice.
what's funny is you can't see it behind because it's behind your Earth and Nightfall, but there's a Anthony Shakir record behind that.
That's fun. That's really cool.
Yeah, yeah. Man, you're dropping some really good names.
Yeah,
Blake
yeah.
Baxter is so underrated.
So underrated.
I know.
Nice
It's
guy
just
too. Yeah.
yeah, there's some great secondary. What I kind of you obviously know the Juan Atkins, the Derek Mays, the Kenny Larkins, but there's always Carl Craig. There's always this kind of second tier like Theo Parrish and Anthony Shakir and Blake Baxter and Stacy Poland, all those great names that maybe don't get quite the recognition, but there's such a great history of Detroit techno around that time. Drexia, you know what I mean?
Right.
Just amazing music.
Yeah.
Um, that's awesome. That's an amazing story. And so your first record kind of hits on both sides. You know what's funny is you mentioned that whale sound, the whale sound. It always reminds me of E2, E4 with the bird sound. Whenever I hear the whale, that kind of nature sound that kind of signifies,
It was kind of a thing, So
yeah,
yeah, there was a thing at the time, early '90s. I kind of, not to jump too far forward, but I was started getting into like deep forest and some kind of things that weren't or techno, dance
yeah,
music. So I started incorporating uh, some of those some of those things into my what would be called techno. So I was a little late, right, Tim? So there a lot of records had come out by the time Aquatic came out. People like to think, it was Detroit thing was a '90s thing. It was a late '80s thing into like early 3-4 years of the '90s,
yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So I got started a little late. When Aquatic was accepted, but it was definitely next wave kind of shit, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're perfectly aligned with the second wave of Detroit techno.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just right in there, kind of maybe obviously right after Carl, because Carl was already doing crazy good shit.
You were
Kenny
right with
was
Kenny Larkin.
right there. Kenny
Yeah,
timing, Kenny, yes, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Some great years in there.
Some great years, and listen, we learned from the best. Quite,
Yeah,
the guys that before us or that first wave, um, we're the we're kings, man.
nice. And so you being on Buzz, was that kind of like your introduction to sort of getting recognized over Europe and how did that all happen when once you get signed to RNS?
Yeah, well, Buzz was a Belgian label, right?
Yeah,
So yeah, I mean, Renat's gonna get Renat's gonna get wind of that, isn't he?
yeah,
Um, and he contacted me. I think I didn't contact him. I don't think. Maybe I sent a demo. but I think they contacted me and wanted to do a record. And then like he was over the top um, enthused, I guess is the way to put it, about offering me a deal. So he was like, yeah, we're not full of energy even at his age now. And he was, yeah, all in on the John Beltran album.
Yeah, that's one thing about Renaud was he could definitely pinpoint some of the best music that was out, whether it be
And he'd go get it.
hardcore or
And he
Detroit
would go get it.
techno.
He had the resources to go get it. He had a way about him as well. He was a likable guy, and he made you feel good about yourself. And when you're a kid, you're like, all right, I'll run through a wall for this dude.
Yeah, you've been on some amazing '90s labels: Peacefrog, RNS, all the way to Exceptional, Apollo, um,
Delsin,
Ubiquity, Transmat.
yep,
What
Delsin.
Well, I was going to get to the later 2000s for sure on that. But what do you think is your probably through your first maybe 2002, your first 10 to 12 years? What do you think is your most the release you're most proud of?
Probably, I gotta say, 10 Days of Blue.
Yeah.
Because of the still the outpouring of love is crazy. It is a good record, and I've been known to criticize myself. If people know me or read an article, I've been known to like beat the shit out of my music. And when I'm done with it, it's kind of a weird thing for me. But that record is a really good record. Everything from the artwork to the timing to what it meant to me, even personally. Sonically, it's really freaking good.
Yeah.
I really nailed it. But also, I can't leave out Earth and Nightfall, the debut, because the debut allowed me to say some of the things I wanted to say from the Detroit years and put myself out there as, because I was kind of done. I don't know if you know this. I was done really chasing the Detroit techno dream by the time I made Earth and Nightfall. Because like I said, I brought in a lot of world elements. If you
Yeah, yeah.
feel it, even if it was, I don't mean congas or live. I'm talking about the feel of it rhythmically. I kind of moved into. So I think Earth and Nightfall really is the both best of both worlds for me. It was like a transition, but people still think of it as a techno record. But I think it's as much an ambient techno record as it is as 10 Days of Blue is. It's just maybe a little beat or a little more beat heavy at times.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of consider Earth and Nightfall probably the album that most ties to what you're doing now, more so
I think so.
than
think so.
10 Days of Blue feels like Indio or feels like more to your point to Detroit techno.
Yeah.
Do you feel like I know you are a harsh critic of your own music. I think of like Human Engine, for example, and you're not. I've heard you say that you weren't necessarily happy with some of that, but was with 10 Days of Blue, if I'm not mistaken, was it you were obviously listening to a and maybe it's inspired maybe even by a little bit of Aphex Twin with the Kino track. But is there any particular track in there that you feel like you could have done differently or doesn't work? Because I always felt like that track is kind of an outlier, but still works in it. But do you feel like there's any part of 10 Days of Blue that you do again?
I think Flex is an interesting one because Flex is my Aphex Twin.
Okay,
Um,
yeah, I mean Flex. Yeah,
probably
sorry.
probably that Aphex.
Yeah.
That's my Aphex quote twin for me. Like yeah, he was, definitely influenced by him, and I just think I don't know if it fits the record. A lot of people go, I love Flex. Um,
Mm,
that's the one I think it's not as cohesive, doesn't fit for me because
mm,
10 Days of Blue was predominantly supposed to be almost like an ambient Kraftwerk record.
yeah.
Does that make sense?
For sure.
Arpeggios, simplicity, a lot of space in between rhythms, um, polyphony, and all that sort of thing. So um, I felt like I kind of just threw Flux on there, and I think if I'm not mistaken, Peter at Peacefrog really, I think he wanted that one because I submitted a couple. There was one, and it's on a DAT somewhere, and I will find it for you people. One that did not make it because Peter did not want it on the record.
Mm.
It was my favorite. I think one of my favorite three songs, along with Collage of Dreams, Soft Summer, and this other song. I need, first of all, to go buy a new DAT player, and I need to go find my DATs and need to find this song because
Mm.
it's an outtake.
That'll be a 10 Days of Blue outtakes.
Yeah,
That'd
it
be
was really, it was, I wonder if I'll like it as much now because I haven't heard it. But
yeah.
I wanted it on there so bad. And it wasn't like an argument or anything, but I think he just, time of the record or something, just kind of asked me not to include it.
Nice. And so I guess there's probably some demos on there as well. Probably on
Yeah,
those.
no doubt. There's some kind of, uncompleted soft summers for sure. Shit, man, I got to find that, right?
And so
Yeah.
the success of 10 Days of Blue and is that leading to a lot of playing out? Like, are you starting to get like DJ dates? Are you getting asked to play it in unique places, South America?
Yeah. So my performance history is a funny one. I um, started DJing in like 1997, right after the Placid Angles, and we go into that. But the second, my second Peace Frog release. But I was starting to get into things like acid jazz and things of that nature, and was playing soul, disco, funk, stuff like that. So I kind of moved on from the um, the ambient electronica world by
Mm.
'97.
Yeah.
Was messing around with more break beats and drum and
Drum and
bass.
bass. Yeah.
I was getting into that, right?
Mm.
So, and jazz forms of that, right? Or as far as listening, and then, yeah. So, I there's nobody to, I wasn't playing records like Derek and those guys from the late '80s, early '90s. So, I didn't have a DJ. Um, um, I just didn't have a name as a DJ, right? Even when I started dropping these kind of more dancey records, right? Um, I suppose I guess I wish I had, but I don't regret anything. So I started playing more lounges. I would play this kind of jazz night in my hometown on a Thursday night and would play more kind of a mixture of things. Played Tribe Called Quest next to Bjork, next to Coltrane. It was a um, it was just playing music, and I was kind of done with just the machine sound of side of my of compositions and looked for more organic ways to express myself. But to answer your question, so I never really was asked to ever do anything, even with the 10 Days of Blue, which when it hit in '96 was an explosion. I was never really asked to play it live, and if I was um, probably a big no with that because I didn't have a way to do it. I guess I could have just shown up with my computer,
Yeah.
right? My freaking desktop computer and played that and at the time it was um, all MIDI files. I could have done it. It actually would have been kind of neat, but I didn't. I don't know if laptops were a thing, so it would have been a little bit a heavy move to do something like that. Internationally, especially, which is where I was getting all my love for the record. Um, but no, I haven't. I've had a spotty request for performances over the years, which is fine. I've been okay with that too because I've played live with other musicians, brought them on stage, played parts. I've gone on with samples in a laptop and played back and then played over the top. Um, and I'm going to be playing Deck Mantle this year. Deck Mantle Selectors. I'm going to be playing the on the beach doing an ambient set. So
Oh,
it's been spotty, and I'm okay with that. I don't know if I have the foundation, or I don't know if I don't have the um, constitution to be out there traveling at my age, playing live sets all over the place, but or even DJing. I DJ less and less nowadays too. So.
yeah. So back in the '90s, you didn't really like do any raves or anything, or like
No, no, no.
no,
I was done. I
no.
was done with dance, we dance music,
Yeah.
culture by the time 10 Days of Blue hit.
Okay, that makes
I
sense.
was
I
re-
mean that I've never asked you that question, but
Mhm.
it definitely makes sense with the trajectory of your releases.
Sure, sure.
So that makes complete sense. I just wasn't sure if there was any early '90s stuff to where you had asked to been played overseas
No,
or
never. I may have been. Okay, I
yeah,
may have been asked, but I just didn't have. I didn't have the setup. I didn't. First of all, to do live or DJ. I mean, I had records, but I didn't have crates of records. I
yeah,
I bought my records. I loved my records, and I got a lot out of those records. But I didn't have I wasn't collecting to play. I didn't wasn't looking for
yeah.
the new thing. These things are all used as a tool to inspire me.
Yeah. Well,
That makes sense.
it's funny to hear that now because as a fan of your music, growing up through the '90s, you always felt like the difference between a producer and a DJ. Like, because I always felt like the just the scene and playing out was very obviously it's a DJ culture world and it's more apt to the history of DJing and clubs. And it never facilitated correctly somebody like yourself how to squeeze in somebody who wasn't a DJ and somebody who was a producer that could still play live, but maybe it didn't really maybe it was more the promoter's fault in not really identifying the difference and I still feel like it hasn't really identified the difference between who's a producer can play their music live or record it or who's just a really good DJ. Like it still seems like you know, something's not identified correctly. And it seems like from your background, it wasn't identified correctly for you to be asked and allowed to play music live.
I don't. Yeah, I don't think it was ever a goal either for me.
Okay.
That's why if I was ever asked, I was probably like, nah. I was once called by a friend of mine who wrote for Playboy magazine, the music section of Playboy magazine in Holland. My friend Willem once called me in one of his articles, Steely Dan of techno, which is funny. Um, and if I find that article, I'll send it to you someday.
What's funny is
I
we
have
talked about Walter Becker in the
what's
past.
that?
We've talked about Walter
Yeah,
Becker in the
we've talked plenty about those guys. But my thing is that, or his point was that they never played live really after a certain point. Early on, they did. We're not going to go into Steely Dan too much, but I never played live. I was a studio musician. I did everything at home, shot it off to the labels, and that was it. You would never really hear from me again until the next record. I did interviews, but you never see me perform or anything. So I lived. I mean, that's the way I wanted it too. I really lived kind of a private athletic life. I loved to play tennis and I loved to play soccer in those days in the 90s. Music was something I did and loved doing, but at a certain point, especially around 10 Days of Blue, I was done partying and like going to these clubs and things where I music was just part of my life. It wasn't my lifestyle, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I've always looked at your music as you're somebody who's taking Detroit soul and putting it into other styles of music. You've done Brazilian, you've done drum and bass, you've done techno, you've done ambient, you've done soundtracks, you've done.
Yep.
So I think in the long run, I mean, that's just gonna bode more well for your, just your career and your trajectory, and as far as your music being more timeless, I feel like,
Yeah, it's
you
just
know.
I did what I wanted to do. I have never done what I don't want to do. Even just doing recently, I've done some things for a couple labels that are like really hardcore dance music, acid house, couple acid house tracks for a label, and um, they are. It's just because I wanted to do it. It's like nobody's going to tell me what to do. They never did. They never have. I did have a couple problems with some labels. I don't have to mention names that did try to make me ask me to do something that I was not willing to do.
Yeah.
Um, I did once try doing it, and quite frankly, it just wasn't real. It wasn't good. Let's be honest.
Mm, gotcha.
Yeah,
Well, that's
yeah.
honest.
I can only do what I'm like. My vision inspires me to do. I can't. Um, I'm not a. I am a workhorse when it comes to certain things nowadays. I can produce. I can do remixes, which I never did years ago. I can knock those out, and I'm pretty good at it. And I just put my stamp on it. But I'm still doing what I want to do.
Nice, nice. Cool. Well, thanks for letting me kind of pick your background a little bit and your history. I'd
Yeah.
like to move on to I brought up some tracks for you,
Yeah.
and this might be a little hard to kind of put you on the spot and see what you think of the tracks, but
Okay.
I wanted to include some music of yours in the program. So I chose 7 tracks from various parts of your career, and you tell me what you either remember or what you think about those tracks. All
Sounds
right?
good.
All
Yeah.
right. So the first one I have, and this one, it reminds me of Brian Eno. Every time I hear this track, I almost think of
Good
Brian
stuff.
Eno that made it. Like it's just such an amazing track. And I'll give you a curveball. So Collage of Dreams from
Yes.
10 Days of Blue. What were your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
On the song.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So that. Yeah. There you go.
I know we both got a copy.
Yeah. I was gonna put it behind me, but then I was just like, that's kind of cheesy. I'm not
Yeah,
gonna
I
do
can do
that.
that for you here.
Shamelessly. Yeah. Collage of Dreams, one of most people's favorite song from the record, I would say. Um, it was the approach I had on that one was I was listening to or really feeling a lot of kind of harmonic arpeggiated rhythms by artists like Michael Brook and even like some things that U2 was doing because they had worked with Michael Brook in the movie Heat and Brian Eno, the
Okay.
three. Um, and that was kind of a neat a really poignant moment for me in the whole arpeggio game, if you will. Um, I did some cool things with on Earth and Nightfall, but I really took it to the next level. I think on this record, and with that, the organic side of things. It wasn't a Moog sound, a Moog sound. It was a guitar. It's a guitar harmonic sound that I had on my keyboard, a bass sound actually, which gave it even fuller, more robust kind of feel to it than it would a kind of a guitar harmonics. So this particular sound, this bass sound, kind of electric bass sound, had you could select 2 different or 3 different little variations of it, and the harmonics were one of them. And I had just been kind of inspired or influenced by a lot of the stuff that I just mentioned, the Michael Brook and the Edge, and things that they had always done with their guitars. And so I just programmed this line, um, and it just kind of took off from there. As far as the idea, it was I say take off, but it was a really simplistic idea that song with probably only like what 4 or 5 elements in it. So simplistic, but yet direct, and I achieved my vision, I think, fully with that and a couple other songs on the record. But I really, I didn't overproduce it, if you will, Tim. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it's funny you it's not maybe not a coincidence you mentioned kind of has a soundtrack feel because it definitely has like a reflective soundtrack sort of a little bit more minimal than your normal your
That's
normal
a
arpeggios you
Sure,
so,
sure. Yeah, I let it, the delay gives the music a whole on the sound gives the rhythm, everything it needs. Enough space is filled with that sound plus the delay that it's kind of like I refer to a guy like Andy Summers, how um, he could fill an arena or a stadium with his guitar. That's why those three guys um, sonically could achieve what they did, especially live, which I've seen them live. But that's kind of once again, I draw from a lot of different kinds of music. That really I achieved what I wanted to with that song for sure, filling in the gaps with the least amount of smallest amount of tracks.
Gotcha. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Let's listen to it here. actually brought up this compilation was the first place I ever heard it.
Cool.
And so that was the first time I had heard your music. This came out on
Mm.
Quango Records.
Quango, yeah, Quango.
Yeah,
So that's crazy. So
yeah.
I didn't know the cover there. So Quango, the owner of that was Bruno Gez was his name. Became a good friend of mine actually. He brought me up to Montreal. Not to go off too much on this, but he brought me up to Montreal. He's a big fan. He also put Soft Summer on a compilation, and he brought me up to do a remix for up to Montreal to do a remix for a Cirque du Soleil song.
Oh,
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I got to see Cirque du Soleil and the whole operation. There was really a fantastic experience. Bruno
oh,
Gez, yeah, I wonder how he is these days.
yeah. They had a nice series. It was called Dimensions and Ambience.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, they had a
Fuego.
couple other series too, but they were all kind of related to ambient music and down tempo. I think they were a subsidiary of Island, maybe,
Yeah, well, they
or
had major label affiliation for sure.
yeah, I couldn't
Yeah.
remember which it was, but they were kind of one that were kind of supporting the sound. Then you were a
Yeah, no doubt.
perfect.
Yep.
That's one of my favorite down tempo compilations.
Cool, cool. Yeah, Quango. Great.
Yeah. So moving on to what are your thoughts on Paris is Burning from
Paris is
1997?
burning on moving through here. Apollo. Yeah, one of the kind of for me a track that's I don't really think it was any part of my vision when I started that record. Kind of turned out being um, a John Beltran esque production in line with type of production in line with stuff that was on what's it called on Earth and Nightfall, kind of like synaptic transmissions in that vein, right? Kind of a sound. It was like a broken or a break beat rhythm, right? Which was kind of I'd done some good stuff with that. Like I think Blue World is one of those, but I think it's not one of my favorite tracks. But it was kind of for me when you're doing a record like that that I was trying to do moving through here, I needed to kind of connect the dots, if you will, from Earth and Nightfall. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't know if I totally nailed it. Pretty sure I didn't. I'm being kind to myself. I'm being kind to myself, but it was it was and it directly influenced by my time in France. So that hence the name of the the song, as well as I had a friend speak French on it as well, as you know.
Yeah, I think when I think of your creativity in all the genres, I think Americano and moving through here are highly underrated.
Okay.
I know you have some thoughts and opinions of maybe the collection of songs and the cohesiveness of them, but I think there's some as well as the Sky series was a
Yeah, well, I appreciate
fantastic
it. I
release
like
as
it. I
well.
love the Sky series. I love
Yeah.
that EP. The problem I have with some of my records, and I kind of corrected that post um, moving through here, is that you just stay on message is my what I have to tell myself. When I decide to take on a project, an album project, I stick with your vision, and don't let other people's kind of opinions, like I might have done on moving through here, affect you, because it just becomes a hodgepodge, in my opinion. Where 10 Days of Blue was a vision. I stuck with my vision. The label owner did not bother me. He gave me all of the freedom in the world to do what I wanted to do. And you hear that, I think you know that with anybody, any record you listen to, where they really stuck with their message. And I just think there's some good things on moving through here. I like some more than others, quite much more than others on that record. Just felt like moving through here has great moments, and some really moments that just were not great to me. And that's just I mean, I have a few albums like that. So I've
Yeah.
done a lot of albums, Tim. So I mean, not all of them can roll like 10 Days of Blue.
Yeah, do you think well, they're special to me, so I
Hey, no,
think
no, everybody has their
yeah.
own thing, right? Some people like my Ubiquity stuff, and it's a moment in time. They never even heard 10 Days of Blue. So yeah,
Yeah.
we have our things, but yeah, I mean, I know you love Paris is Burning.
Yeah. Do you feel like I know now that you mentioned that, I had a question for you a little bit later, but maybe I can ask it now. Is that why you like to record under different names a lot? So in a way, it kind of identifies what you want to sound like with that label, so they can sort of let you do your thing and or ask for that type of style of music. Is that why you like to do music under different names?
Well, I love all kinds of music, and I, quite frankly, look like a crazy person if everything was under John Beltran and that I do. So I've had to curve that a little bit here. I haven't done as many full lengths in consecutive years as I had before because I really need to. I love to express myself different ways, and quite frankly, everything being John Beltran is really not the case anyways because on some music I have other people playing or singing or I'm part of the unit, part of it, I'm the leader or I'm the producer of it. Some things are just me but really don't sound like me. 10 Days of Blue, right? So I come up with an alias and I'm able to kind of express my other interests with other names. I don't mind people knowing it's me. I'm not trying to hide from it, but I want people to know that this is this and that's that, right?
Um, Snowdrifts.
Yeah,
Thoughts on Snowdrifts?
yeah, it's a good one.
What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, it was kind of a transition record for me from um, where I was kind of done with. Um, was kind of like my farewell to the '90s in a way.
Yeah.
Um, there were some organic moments. There were some kind of Detroit moments on it. Um, so yeah, it was I was really going into more world music like full time at
Hmm.
that point. So that that particular record was is definitely has its moment in time. And as far as that song, it was pure ambient reflection on maybe a decade of work of mine. And it's probably more ambient than anything I'd ever done to that point. If you would probably, or at least there was a couple on moving through here, or even the Placid Angles record that came out in '97. So I got a chance to kind of say farewell to a couple of things that I would ultimately come back and revisit the next decade. But it was definitely a look back.
because I was going to do this one, but I couldn't necessarily find the audio sample for it to put it on the video. But I felt like this was your kind of your comeback in a way. This was your remix of June Lopez,
Okay.
called Interpretations.
Yeah, that was a while ago.
Yeah, 2005, but I couldn't find it online, so I won't be able to put it on the video. So instead, I chose Sweet Soul. What can you tell us about Sweet Soul?
Sweet Soul is kind of that's a great pick. That is my closest to, you know, post 90s kind of experimenting and trying to go back to the 10 Days of Blue, arpeggios, no kick drum, a lot of rhythm. There's bass change, nice bass line, and a lot of cool melodies, and has that melancholy 10 Days of Blue vibe, right?
Yeah, it's such a
And
great track.
thank you.
Yeah,
That
let's take a
was
listen to it
that.
now.
I totally tried to go back and capture some of that 10 Days of Blue magic for sure.
Yeah, I felt like those two tracks were kind of your comeback
Mm.
into, you know, transitioning back from the Latin stuff into the
Sure,
Detroit stuff.
sure, yeah,
So those two records always resonated with me.
cool.
Let's check out Sweet Soul. right, cool. Um, so that was a Sweet Soul. It's kind of funny, but I don't know if you remember. I might be one of the only people that have a copy of this. I don't know if you have a copy of this, but this
I
was
don't.
Ruth.
I do not.
Oh, I'll have to share this with you. I think there's only about, I can't remember who the owner was of Rhythmic Deep Records. Was it
His
Oliver?
name was Mike something. Mike Sheffield or something like that.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
just,
he
this,
long story short, if Mike's out there, he just kind of disappeared. Like,
yeah.
what happened to you? But yeah, he's. I did a couple things for him. He's a nice guy. I don't know what he was always trying to do. Cool, good stuff.
What was his last name? Maybe I'll try
I
to pull it up.
forgot it. I thought it was Michael Sheffield, but that doesn't sound right. It was something. It was very English. I forgot the last name though.
Huh.
It
Yeah.
might come to me.
Yeah, because that has the Dream About You, I think, on there. And
Okay.
then two remixes, and then it also has the Josh Wink remix of your Inca track.
Okay. Cool. Very cool.
So if you ever want those, let me know and I'll
Awesome.
let you check those out.
Yep.
Um, moving on. Beauty of Life.
Yeah. Beauty of life.
What are your memories about that track?
Well, that was initially solicited by a Swedish company, and on a compilation, I forgot the name of it, but the guy um, who got me to do that track for the comp, his name is Anders Bursten. Really nice guy. Talked to him all the time back then. I'm friends with him on Facebook, but yeah, that track was totally in the 10 Days of Blue space. And what's funny to me about these songs that I keep saying there were none of them sonically live up to the 10 Days of Blue. Sweet Soul maybe a little bit. I think I did. It was a good recording, and in retrospect, like not everything I did have done that I've done this to this point have been, how should I say, recorded well. In fact, a lot of the stuff I've done sounds terrible to me. You can't play it out. It's muddy. I think the stuff that's on the what's it called, Sky EP. It's not recorded well. It's just not. But the way I recorded 10 Days of Blue was a particular way, and in comparison to when I started going digital and things were on the computer, and I didn't have the chops. 10 Days of Blue is recorded straight from the keyboards through a mixer into a DAT. That you can hear it. It's an analog signal. I've since now become a lot better at recording digitally, a lot better. I think I'm pretty darn good at it now. But there was a muddy area of my stuff, and I gotta be honest. I always thought that Beauty of Life was really muddy. The emotions are there, but
Yeah.
it did not. I did not nail it.
Well, I appreciate you letting me kind of pick some random tracks that are special to me because that's probably really what I hone in on your music the most is the emotion.
Yeah, yeah, cool. Yeah, I
So
mean
that,
that's usually there. I just
yeah,
didn't always nail it with the recording.
yeah. Let's check out Beauty of Life sample now. When the
Hey, all
sun
right.
shines through.
Yeah.
Another great emotional track you did.
Thank you.
Any thoughts
Well,
on that one?
yeah, kind of, ambient, right?
Yeah.
In its purest form. Um, Placid Angles is a thing that is a blend of ambient and breakbeat, and sometimes together. But on that particular song, um, it's yeah, just a pure ambient scape, right? And so, yeah, I mean, like, yeah, Placid Angles is a very near and dear to me, Tim, and to this day, it's one of the projects I still get a lot of reward um, producing. In fact, I have another Placid Angles coming out this year on Oath Records that and I'm finishing the last track in the next week or so, and
Oh,
pretty excited about
fantastic.
it.
Oh,
Yeah,
fantastic. Good
yeah.
stuff. So let's check out a sample of When the Sun Shines Through. All right, so the last one I chose was one that actually is special to me because I had a small part in making happen,
Hmm.
and it's actually a
Yeah.
remix of yours. So, what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on the ERP remix, the electro remix
Really awesome.
for
Really,
your
really
Phoenix?
great. Simple and to the point and better than the original, in my opinion.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, yeah, it was that good.
Yeah, it's Jordan, man, he's just a fantastic producer, Jared Hansen,
Beast. Yeah,
ERP.
some people are just really great remixers, and apparently he is too. And I love that record. We did good, and it was a great call to get him. That was your call for sure.
No, I appreciate that. That was, I mean, that and getting Indio landed for you and getting that reissued.
On vinyl, which it never
Uh,
was.
yeah, I think they did a great job of this. Jimmy had
The
some
artwork,
wax.
it's the same but different. Really great.
Yeah, those are definitely um, two of my favorite things that we got. I did a small part in helping you with, and
Not at all. It was great. No, we nailed it.
I appreciated the time we worked together, and
Yep.
it's always good sharing your music, and always good to help you you know angle through the stuff so you can stay focused on music.
Yep. I
So
appreciate you.
I'll certainly always be there for you.
Yep. Likewise.
Cool. So thanks for letting me focus in on some of your music and
Yeah. Cool. Cool.
share it. these are kind of random questions I have for you, and then we're going to go on to a little bit of your future.
Okay.
Any artists that you're into right now?
Yeah, it's like
Anybody's
when you,
music?
it's like when you go to a record store and think that you're gonna find exactly what you want. You need to write it down. Geez, let's take a look. Do you mind?
No, no, no. You can give us a couple shout outs of people that you're interested in.
Yeah, well, a lot of this stuff is I've listened to a lot of edits and old school music these days, Tim, as well as my DJing. And I'll be honest with you, there's not a lot of new stuff that's grabbing my ear. I do like this guy here. This is interesting. I don't know if you've ever heard of Peter Cat Recording Company.
Mm, no.
Kind of a cool live, full-on band type crew, all Indian immigrants, and pretty cool stuff. They've kind of fit in the Balearic space. Um, if you want to give it a try, this one of my favorite songs is called "Memory Box." One of my favorite songs by them right now, and this is just what's kind of coming up right away in my what I've purchased recently. Um, let's see here. This is embarrassing. I do like Krangbin. I do. I like them.
Who's that?
Krangbin. On occasion, I like them.
Oh yeah, with the K. With K, yeah.
Yeah, kind of moody when I'm in the mood for it. Definitely
Yeah,
summer.
my dad was a big favorite, big fan of them.
Yeah, yeah. They,
Yeah,
they have like such a desert vibe. Something about them.
yeah.
Pretty into them. Geez, I feel so. I'm embarrassed that I just don't have anything off the top of my head.
No, it's okay. These are.
Yeah, no doubt. There's a guy by the name of Crack is that I really like as far as like house music and kind of takes me back to the Jamiroquai days.
How
Um,
do you spell that?
yeah, K or Crackazat. Crack is that.
Oh
He's
wow.
uh he's actually fantastic. Really talented guy. Plays bass, keys, things, the whole thing. Um, I listened to a lot of George Michael lately. A lot of Tears for Fears. Um,
I think we talked about George Michael one time. The keyboard in on the Faith album is great.
yes. Oh yeah. Fantastic.
Uh,
I mean, I love Wham.
what's the ballad on? Not yeah,
Um,
Father Figure.
Father Figure is great.
Yeah,
Fantastic. And they use the Lindrum
yeah,
um throughout the record and on Wham as well. Everybody used it back in the 80s, and it's kind of becoming a staple in my future production, which we'll get into in a little bit. But like, let's see here. I big time Brian Ferry guys, you and I both love him. Um, Love Kate Bush, off the charts. Kate Bush guy. Peter Gabriel,
What's your
off the
favorite
charts.
period of Kate Bush?
Hounds of Love. That's it.
Uh,
It begins. It just encapsulates everything.
yeah, I
Um,
like Sensual Dreaming, like
yeah,
those
that's
two
great.
albums.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
great
I think
period.
Hounds of Love encapsulates all of the progression at that point.
Uh-huh.
Um, and like a mother's what's it called? Mother stands for comfort.
Mm-hmm.
Is Kate Bush? Like in a nutshell, that particular song. And I love Sting, Sting and the Police. And I've really got a chance to go back and or watch some things that he's way more affable now. Does interviews and isn't a grumpy old Gus anymore, and he's doing interviews, and he's kind of you get a little chance to learn more about this guy, which he's a bit of a turnoff for years. Even though I love his music, you just couldn't. He just seemed reluctant to even tell you anything in his interviews, right? I
Yeah,
don't know if you gather that from him, but or how much you follow him, but I followed him hardcore since the early '90s, and it's just it's he's really fun to listen to now. He's softened quite a bit.
yeah, he was definitely known in the press, and especially in the '80s, for being very stoic and
Yeah.
grumpy. In fact, Saturday Night Live did a skit on him with him in it. Oh no, actually it was Sting. He was sort of acting as himself, but he was imitating. He was supposed to be Brian, Billy Idol,
Okay.
but in a way, it was perfect for him because he was also kind of that kind of angst and
Yes. Yes.
disillusion with the press.
Yes.
But have you?
But also quite arrogant. Even when he wanted an interview, he tend to um, just he's just it was a tug of war every time he was in an interview. So
Yeah,
he's definitely let that loose, put that down a little bit.
yeah. Have you heard Kate Bush's Ariel album?
Hmm.
I'll have to send that to you sometime.
Okay.
Check that album. It's from 2007. It was kind of her comeback album.
Okay. I'm glad she's
Uh,
still working. I have this conversation with my sister all the time about artists that aren't working anymore, which just drives me insane. When they're fully capable and so talented, and yes, she still works and still
yeah,
performs.
yeah. It's a really good album. So moving on, what are your thoughts on AI music and using that as a tool and just the overall thought of AI with when it comes to music?
Yeah, there's things to like and things to be interested in, and things to like and things not to like. I think with anything, but I'm not totally up on everything. I just, I think it's dangerous and also exciting and also just there's so much. I tend to fall somewhere in the being more positive about it, um, the world in general. But I think about the world in general. But I think there's um, there's things to be to kind of just hopefully you know let's say let's say you these algorithms or whatever they do these whatever the AI does to capture an idea and then spit it out. If there's ever a way that they can identify these things, I think there's going to be real trouble. If labels find a way to identify that their music has been stolen,
Hmm.
I don't know, that then that becomes that's the problem, right? Isn't it? And then people are going to be using this stuff in movies or TV, and then the producers are going to get their asses kicked. And there's so many things that could be coming down the pipe. Not just the making of it, but the dissecting of it, and someone having to pay the piper in the end, right?
Yeah,
That's pretty interesting, isn't it? But I also think there's ways to use I'll probably never use it. Pretty sure I won't. But as a tool, vocals. I've seen where people sing and it comes out as a female, and that's not my jam. But I don't hate that. But there also is a price to pay if that vocal is stolen from vocal texture or styling is stolen from someone, right?
yeah,
And we have the technology where we're at now, but we're gonna have the technology to be able to dissect where the hell this shit's coming from too. I really
yeah.
believe that.
So it might be a type of thing where it depends how popular the track gets, just like how it was in sampling. You know, if it
Exactly
gets really
right. Exactly.
popular,
Yeah.
then somebody's
Yeah.
gonna,
Sample all you want, but
yeah,
you're not going to go put it in as the lead track in a blockbuster film, right?
yeah,
And get away with it, right? Sample
yeah.
all you want at home, but ultimately, if you're going to monetize it and in some way in the future, technology will be able to break that down and see where they got this shit.
Yeah, I always kind of compare it to, I guess, music supervision and,
Hmm.
post-production audio.
Hmm.
As far as like, it taking jobs away from some people. What are your thoughts on that possibility of maybe, there's people out there that write jingles for commercials. Obviously that job's pretty much gone away. So there's a little bit of that I feel, not to put my opinion in it, but there's some jobs that are kind of taken away from AI, but I guess it creates other jobs as well.
Yeah, you walk through a store and there's like a there's a self cleaning floor. like floor cleaner. I mean, like a robot.
Yeah.
It's happening everywhere and everything. The thing is, you'll never see, and I heard this from a friend the other night. You'll never go to in our lifetime. I don't think you'll ever go to a great AI live show, right? So we have that
Kraftwerk at
going. We have
Kraftwerk.
that going for us, huh?
A robot version of Kraftwerk, maybe.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah, would that keep your attention? Not me.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll keep people's attention in 100 years, but it wouldn't keep mine now.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. There's always a live aspect to it all.
Yeah, so there's that trickles down to production as well, and having your thumb on the finger or finger on the pulse or whatever the term is, thumb on the pulse of the culture is a thing that musicians have done throughout time. I think music is totally different now. I'm not a big fan of modern music, as it relates to like radio music. I loved popular music when I was a kid. I loved popular music growing up as a teen. I loved popular music as an adult a lot of times. And I don't now. And I'm very open to everything. And I cannot say that I am a fan of really any popular music now. Now, one thing, and I would think a lot of ways that's where the AI stuff is like kind of being used, anyways. And it all just sounds like very uninteresting music to me, anyways. I mean, you could play a pop track now next to an AI song. To me, I wouldn't know the difference, but I wouldn't even like one more than the other. To me, it's the same shit today. And I'm not a curmudgeon. I'm open to the good ideas. There are good songs, I'm sure. I just haven't dug far enough into, let's say, Taylor Swift's, catalog to find one of those songs. Not saying that she hasn't done a great song. Everybody's not good for a song or two, right? I mean, the songs are the heroes at the end of the day. But popular music and AI are kind of one and the same to me nowadays.
Yeah, it was interesting. Yesterday, every Monday and Tuesday, as you know, or I may have told you, I do some reviews online, and every Monday I get to choose from this list of stuff to review, and then on Tuesday I get a docket sent to me of stuff I need to review, right? So one of these I got yesterday, and it was a 52 track compilation of all techno and tech house stuff.
Brand
And then
new,
I
brand new
and,
music.
and then I looked up the label, right?
Uh huh.
And this label must have had 30 releases this year alone. And so I was thinking it's an AI label. And they're just putting out a ton of music. Just like I think there's a lot of people that like they think content will like put out a lot of content, something will catch, right?
Yeah.
Put out a lot of songs, something will catch. So I had the feeling that it was like an AI label,
Hmm.
which was interesting and also a
It's
little
not.
disheartening
It's not.
because I
It's not a
didn't,
good. It's not a good feeling. You just said you had a feeling. It's not a good feeling. It's not.
you know.
It's not attractive, is it?
Well, listen, yeah, I mean, listening to going into it, knowing that I had to listen to 52 tracks that were computer made was not the quite same enjoyment that getting to know an artist by listening to their music.
No doubt.
So there is a lack of connection there with the artist because there's something in between, and maybe that's the tie that doesn't work.
Yeah, somebody has a bright idea out there, labels that they're just gonna like that music is a throwaway thing. There's a great quote by a friend of mine who's a piano player on some of my newer music. He talks about people just move on from music so quickly nowadays, where years ago we would drag music along with us through our whole lives, that we got things out of records. We still go back to these records, right?
Mhm.
I still get so much out of Sting's Nothing Like the Sun. um, I didn't move on from. I'll never move on from that. And encapsulate what I think both you and I agree upon is that there's going to be positive things with it. I look forward to maybe possibly using things as reference, right? In production. and then ultimately still going back to the roots and recording people live or whatever. I think it could be a great sketching for me as a great sketchbook going forward. I look forward to kind of maybe even I'll look into how I can do that even in my most kind of my projects that I have coming up pretty soon. So it's very interesting because just singing and then changing over to a woman's voice and hearing female textures on the track or something could be very interesting. I'm actually looking forward to that. So I'm not going to disparage it, but it's also a little weird for us from our generation, right?
Yeah, yeah. So moving on to your label. So you started label a couple years ago. Tell us a little bit about that label and the future of your label.
Yeah, so the label was barely a label. So we just put out a couple of records, and quite frankly, the busy lifestyle of my partner and I, my partner Shane Donnelly, an old buddy of mine, we kind of wanted to kind of relive some things that we did in the early 2000s, where he executively produced a record called Soul Set, a song called Aztec Girl from the early 2000s. And he kind of just hit me back and it hurt me up one day. And I was like, hey, man, I feel like we just never really finished that idea. And I'm like, I'm into it. To be honest, down deep, I was like, I really don't want to do this. It's a lot of work, creative work. I don't mind work, but a lot of creative work. It needs this particular project was a live oriented project. I needed players, and quite frankly, working with players isn't always the most fun thing to do, Tim. And even when you like the guys, it's just a lot of you got to really love it to want to do it. That kind of thing, right?
Mm.
So not to go off too much on that, I was like, well, I think I could really saddle up and do this. So we put out a record called Ola de Novo, which is Portuguese for hello again. We did an album called Ola de Novo, produced 8 songs or so of kind of Brazilian soulful jazz driven kind of stuff. It got a lot of good feedback, but we didn't put the resources into it and the time and the effort that we could have to. And we've kind of remodeled our focus on how we're going to approach this year and the releases that we are going to put out this year. Whether it be just more of an online presence, a more consistent presence, and more professional presence, along with really, really awesome material. So this year, 2025 is do or die for our label at the level that we've kind of hoped to get to, putting the resources, the money into the music first and foremost, and then also to back up the music with the proper machine behind it to get it where it needs to get and get it to the ears and people that that it deserves.
And the name of the label is
All Good Music.
All Good Music. And is this an outlet for you specifically, or for other people, or what do
Well,
you
no,
see?
it's been very, very, very small, kind of vision for it in the beginning because we just did the Soul Set record. We've done a couple. This year we have a Soul Set EP, 4 songs, one with a Sade cover of the song War of the Hearts, and it turned out really great. As well as a couple of Brazilian heaters on it, and as well as like a kind of a JK Jamiroquai brand new heavies vibe on one track. Very acid jazz, which I spoke of earlier. And we have a jazz record, a jazz 7-inch, with an amazing jazz vocalist out of New York City, and she sings in Portuguese on it. And I produced the music, composed it, produced it, and brought in some really great players to perform the musical elements of this record, as well as I'm going to do a John Beltran full length, which I haven't done a proper full length. She's under the name John Beltran in a few years. I did one called John Beltran Project, an album called Serendipia, and that is on Oath. And this is maybe that was a good prelude to, I think, where I'm going to be going with this next record on All Good Music. It's going to be very organic, and yet it's going to have a lot of throwback 80s feel to it. and some of the artists that we spoke of, I would love to feature like Kate Bush on something like this. So we're gonna see where we end up in their initial um, production of this record. If we can go get artists like that, then I think it would be really fantastic. Even if we don't, it's gonna be a great record. I have some really awesome vision. When I have the vision, is usually when the vision and the passion is when I usually achieve what I set out to do.
Nice, nice. And
Yeah.
War of Hearts from Sade was on on her debut album, right? Was it Diamond Life or
Yes, it was. Hold on a second here.
Diamond Life or
Yeah. Yes.
you're dropping some really good names. I saw a brand new Heavies in concert in 1993, I think it was.
All good music, right?
Yeah, I was yeah. I
Actually,
that's a genre.
War of the Hearts is on Promise.
Promise, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, we've never really talked about acid jazz. I definitely have some acid jazz in my collection from back in the day.
Nice.
I thought it was a nice eclectic style.
Yeah, no, it was a great era because you could acid jazz could be anything from like hip hop instrumental grooves to full on full on bands with horn sections. I mean, that was an awesome period. You had mushroom jazz and you had incognito with a full band. You know what I'm saying? So it covered a lot of bases.
Yeah, I was just gonna say there was a psychedelic edge to it
Sure.
that made it kind of like we're big fans of lounge music, so
Yeah, yeah. It's the lounge, it's the
yeah,
San Francisco thing, right? Meets the UK. Like early Jamiroquai records were like off the charts, right? Those were
yeah,
just like it set a tone. Um, those Jamiroquai records, and then after that, people really started to express their soulful sides in the late '90s, which was really mid to late '90s, and I was all in on that.
nice. Um, Wanted to get your thoughts on classifications of music. We talk a little bit like yacht rock and it's interesting how people always try to put things into a box, and I always tell people like that's kind of a media thing to do, but if you talk to people on the same level, you always just bring up artists and labels and you don't really talk about genres. Like, what are your thoughts on you being classified as like a Detroit techno? Does that bother you, or do you feel like what do you think about genre classifications?
Well, I'll start with me. I don't think people classify me that anymore. I think people learned pretty quick that this guy is just going to keep bobbing and weaving out of those uh, comparisons, right?
Yeah,
So I don't think I fall into that. People, when let's say they have to promote me somehow, they might use such terms. But as far as genres, Quincy Jones used to talk about how the genre approach by record labels in the '70s is what kind of killed a lot of a lot of the music business and just put people in boxes and putting people in boxes and happens is not a good thing in the long run. And I think the industry suffered. It sustained and found its way, but record or radio stations used to play um, rock next to soul, next to funk, next to disco when we were young. And next to, you could hear country, you could hear a George Jones song next to, let's say, a Chicago song, right? So it's when, even though we knew that was country music and it had a label, we weren't we weren't thrown into boxes and separated from one. It was so much space in between. And you mentioned yacht rock. If you want to go into that,
sure.
a lot of that music was a very rich, made by very talented composers, players, and their vibes were all similar because of the era and the decade they were in. There was no thought of saying we are all the same. They happened to make music that derive from a lot of the same things, whether it be Southern rock, jazz, R&B, all of those great musics of all of the great music pre 70s. So to me, to just throw all of them together as per the yacht rock um, documentary that we talk about is just like not doing justice to an era of music with very rich heritage and very talented musicians. And not every song on every one of their records was a yacht rock kind of song. So most yacht rock as we know it is popular music, Tim.
Mhm.
So these are kind of the hits on the records. I would say a guy like Christopher Cross.
Especially with yacht rock music specifically.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yes. So, and I think that's the genre that everybody's talking about these days. When you say kind of like, are having a problem. I don't think people have the problem with calling mumble rap hip hop. We know it's not real hip hop from what, where we come from, but, or the era we come from. But to throw everybody into yacht rock term that they played on the radio at the time, and Steely Dan being the main guy, or Donald Fagen being the main guy that they focus on because he wants no part of it, is just doesn't do them their justice as artists and composers and arrangers and players,
Mhm.
um, by just throwing them into a bucket with a stupid name on it.
Yeah, that's well, you brought up a good point about the players, and I think that's one key thing that I feel like you do a good job of in your new label is you're including real musicians to collaborate with you and not just a computer. You know what I mean? Like and I feel like that was really important to that generation of music was those session players and the personality of those recordings.
That's
You know?
exactly right. That's exactly right. I A guy that like the down we covered this the Steely Dan of techno thing. They're the OGs in like where they would record their songs 50 times with, I'm maybe exaggerating, 10, 20 times with different bands, Tim. They might keep the bass player. Everybody else goes. The next group that comes in, and they'll take those and dissect. They're scientific about it. Now, when you think of other bands, they weren't that scientific about how they recorded and who they recorded, because usually their band was their unit, right? So they would just record with what they had. But Steely Dan was ever interchangeable. If you follow them at all, Chuck Rainey on bass, Steve Gadd on drums, and in the next session they record Peg, the same one with a different drummer. You know, so these guys were next level, and to compare them to, let's say, I don't want to call any song up that and disparage it, but let's say a song like uh, "Steal Away" by Rupert Holmes, I think it's called.
Mhm. Yeah.
To compare that, which is yacht rock, and it's to their definition now, to compare that to Deacon Blues by Steely Dan, it's not even the same universe, and it's just the same 10-year era. Is all of it is the closest thing you can. And maybe there's a vibe, but it's not even the same. It's not even the same music.
And maybe it's just because of it's not hard rock or it's not, I mean, anything kind of like not hard rock or classic rock would almost be soft rock. And maybe that's why it's almost being lumped together. I mean, I guess there's some heavy metal in the late 70s with Kiss and Judas Priest and stuff like that. But I always thought that, and we've talked about this, but that percussion is so important and how the drummer kind of shapes the track, the direction of the track. If they're light drumming, then it's generally going to be a softer rock song.
Sure, sure, sure.
And I that was the only thing that I felt was like maybe the technically the difference between not trying to get into the mood of the track or anything or your anybody's opinions and the different opinions, but just as far as like how people play, it's soft. So
Jazz is generally played soft. The drums
true,
are played soft. So there's a
true.
lot of, banging on a drum. Not everything is like Stuart Copeland, right?
Yeah,
Um, and and that's a perfect example there. They're not hard rock, but he plays drums harder than anybody.
yeah,
That guy is what they call it. He's a banger. He bangs on his drums. Um, and I wouldn't call them rock and roll. I would call maybe the Police rock and roll, but they're they're a part of the rock and roll history. They're not what you think of as John Bonham, right? As I
yeah,
think is what you're saying. That's rock hard, hitting rock and roll. But
yeah,
back to what I was saying is that I just don't think that you can glom these great these great bands together, um, because they're not alike. They're not alike. If you want to talk about a vibe and an era, that's exactly right. But and I've heard, even in the documentary, they said George Benson is yacht rock, and he was adamant about it.
mm.
I think that speaks for itself about that documentary.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, I don't,
That's a
yeah, I
bit
think
much.
yeah, it's strange. It's strange that the rock community or rock veterans would have an issue that electronic music sees every month. Like we get that in electronic music all the time. Like, oh, it sounds like this, or why does it sound like that? Why are they trying to change techno and call it EDM? What, like we get it all the time. And
Mhm.
that was like the only time that's ever happened really in rock music. And like it hasn't even really happened in early night, like with grunge, or punk. It really hasn't happened in those. But all of a sudden, like these people into old school rock are saying what's not rock, yacht rock, and
Yeah.
it's
So
interesting.
I just think I really do believe that it was most of it's popular music, pop
Yeah,
music, and generally played by guys that grew up as rock and roll fans, right? I think um, that's the only, I think that's it's as simple as that. As these artists are, um, it's rock and roll. It really is. It's a different. And I just don't think yacht is the word we should be attaching to this kind of part of rock and roll's history. Does that make sense?
yeah, and I guess we last thing I was gonna say about it was it's kind of the idea. Well, I mean, kind of almost represents what a lot of your music is. This where you want to hear it, right? Like a lot of your more Latin music and beachy music, I kind of want to put myself in that environment and hear it on the beach. Like you get asked to play deck mantle. That's the ideal place where I would want to hear your music. Where that was the idea of calling it yacht rock is that they were just on a boat on the water or by the beach. It could have been like that. Just it's just that feeling of where would you want to hear that music? Oh, somewhere relaxing, and it makes sense. I don't understand why people get so upset over a classification like that. That's
Well,
probably been
it's
out for
like,
10
first of all,
years.
I don't know about you. Do you know anyone with a yacht?
Yes.
One person?
No, I don't.
Yeah. Have you been on a yacht?
No. Yeah, I think some point I did.
Okay. But you probably didn't throw the Doobie Brothers on. They probably weren't playing. So the idea is just that why a yacht? I mean, why, the
Well, that's
soft
the
rock,
ideal. That's
huh?
the ideal place to
Is
listen.
it though? Yeah, that's just kind of like I think it's bougie.
Yeah,
Those guys had beards, they had long hair, they smoked a shit ton of dope,
yeah.
and they were half hippie, half jazz artist, half rock and roller. It's just yachts have nothing to do with these guys, man.
True, true. I see what you're saying. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
thinking of it more as a music listener. like they would want to be on somewhere
Yeah,
relaxing.
and that's kind of like my opinion. It's just my opinion. Is I'd rather be camping, listen to them. I'd rather be
Camp rock.
that stuff feels more like that than it does a bougie experience with a drink and a yacht. To me,
Yeah.
yeah. If I think of let's say a one band, well, let's just say the Doobie Brothers, early Doobie Brothers. The last thing I'm thinking about is is a yacht. I'm thinking of my uncles who used to hunt, who smoked too much weed and had beards and long hair. And so when you come from that era and you that stuff was on the radio, the lives that we lived in the 70s, and that was on the radio when you're heading up north in a van with your family, and the 8-track is in. Yachts had nothing to do with that. It's more like canoe. Call it canoe rock before you call it yacht rock, in my opinion.
I like that. Canoe rock or camp rock.
Camp rock.
That'll be
Camp
the
rock
new.
is Camp rock is dope, Tim. I love that.
So I think of camp rock like Simon and Garfunkel.
Yeah, well, sure. Well, that's it depends
It's
on
a
the
little bit
era.
more jamboree. It's a little bit more
No, but yeah,
jamboree.
but that's depends on the decade. In the 60s, first, I'll give you that. 70s, it was Chicago.
Oh yeah, yeah. We've talked about Chicago a lot.
I'm sure I hope you're starting to come around on them because they're brilliant.
Oh, I appreciate that. I got two last questions for you.
Sure enough.
What is your thoughts on the state of techno?
Wouldn't know.
Ah,
I have no idea.
yeah, because you don't listen to too much techno.
No, no.
And what I appreciate about you is you're not really see like, man. When I was younger and my friends wanted to go out to the other clubs, I wanted to go home and listen to the music that I got yesterday that I didn't get a chance to listen to. Like I just the going out atmosphere, especially here in America, just does not do anything for me.
We're older. We're older men now. It's not. That's not
Mm.
part of the thing. If I do like a quote techno record, I'm just drawing on from. I'm drawing on or drawing from songs and artists from the past. Anything I do is pretty much retro driven, even
Yeah,
in all my projects. I really nothing's really calling me from the future, and I like this. I like that we grew up. We were lucky to grow up in the time we did and have access to the music we had before us and the music we had present. The future does not interest me.
I gotcha.
Hmm.
Last question for you.
Yeah.
And you kind of already touched a little bit on this, but how is your how's your recording techniques and your the ways you make music evolved, and how do you see yourself in the future with what you're interested in making? Like, what do you see there? What's your
So
future?
I'm playing more than I have in a while. So my harmonies and my chord progressions are richer, they're deeper, they're getting better. I like to learn. I've been learning old songs that I love. I learned um, "That's the Way It Is" by Bruce Hornsby on piano. Some things that I learned from learning that song, I didn't know as far as theory wise. I learned how I taught my or I just look at tutorials. I learn how to play. I can play "Just the Way You Are" by Billy Joel, and learned a couple of things. It's actually quite easy song to play. Learning the song "If You Leave Me Now" by Chicago. So in doing that, I'm learning new moves, new chord progressions, new fingering, and new voicings that I didn't know. Um, so there's a layer of knowledge that I'm gaining from this, Tim. But I use Pro Tools, which I didn't use in my early digital recording, and it's a really amazing um, DAW that is makes my music sound better. The plugins are off the charts. So as far as process, I love to bring people in, so I love to create the story, and then I love to bring people in. They tell their own story on the music, and it makes the story a whole new story. It takes the story in different directions that I wouldn't have taken it. Maybe I don't have the patience for coming up with a bass line that runs all the way through the song and add variations, right? I don't have the patience for that. I would just come up with a loop bass line, maybe 16 bars at most. So now I have a full song that a bass player expresses his vision on my music. Same with guitars or vocals, or so things have expanded. My music universe has expanded, and that's where the sky's the limit. And I'm, like I said, generally I'm going back in my my inspiration to go forward, and a lot of my music is sounding as a blend of future and past in it, and that's to me my happy place. I mean, quite frankly, using the past to move me forward. It's I don't how do I say this? I don't want to say I don't need music, um, but I love music, and if I'm gonna do music, I need to be motivated, and going back to our roots is really remotivated me going into the second half of my life and career. So.
Nice, nice. Where's the best place for people to find your music right now?
Oh, geez. I mean, I just finished up a series with Motor City Wine Recordings. It's each series, each 7 inch. The second one's not a 7 inch, the second is a 12 inch, but there's 4 7 inches, but it's called Back to Bahia. Bahia is a place in Brazil. It's predominantly Brazilian driven, but and not even Bahia music in particular, because there's so many different kinds of music from Brazil. But we thought it was a cool title for the first one. We called it Back to Bahia, and we were like, "Do you want to do another one?" To my friend David in my Motor City Wine, he's like, "Why not?" And we went all the way to 5, and we just finished 5, and that's coming out like today now. So Back to Bahia, it's kind of a funk Brazilian. One side's a funk Brazilian soul thing. I feature a guy from Brazil from Sao Paulo named Gabriel Oliveira. Sorry, and on the other side, it's more of a house tempo, chill track called um, Belle Isle, and it's an area here in Detroit. I'm inspired by some bike rides out to Belle Isle with my son, and anyways, good energy vibe track, and so that is kind of happening right now. And also, I told you about the Plastic Angles that will be out this year on Oath, and the uh, the two All Good Music records that'll be out this year. The one Soul Set EP, and then the Jazz 7 inch. So look out for those.
Fantastic, fantastic. I'll make sure I put the links down below
Yeah,
for
awesome,
those so everybody can check out your music.
awesome.
Yeah, I really appreciate your time.
Tim, always fun talking. We didn't get in our
Yeah.
tennis. We didn't get to tennis or hockey or anything else, and we'll do that. And probably we'll do that on the phone.
Yeah, for sure. I was gonna do. I wasn't sure how I was gonna do my first interview, what technology I was gonna use, how I was gonna do it, but I knew I wanted you to be the first person I interview on my new channel. So,
Love
thank
it.
you for taking the time with me today. I really appreciate it.
One last thing,
Yeah.
tennis. The goat is Roger Federer,
In the
right?
long run, it will be because Jokic is not going to get to 25.
Djokovic. No, Djokovic already owns Djokovic already owns
True, but he's not going to have any more.
he may get another. My thing is the pure beauty. He's music to our eyes.
Mhm.
Uh, Roger Federer. He's the most graceful athlete of all time.
He's
That's just my
classy,
take.
and he's classy too, which always goes a
He's a
long
good
way.
man. He's a good man.
Yeah, where Joker's the machine.
Hey, he's all right. He's
Oh
he's
yeah,
grown on me.
We'll see what happens to him this year. It'll be an interesting year.
It,
Alcaraz needs to be more aggressive. He
well,
needs more.
center's tough. Center's tough.
Alcaraz needs a little bit more desire. Otherwise, I'm not sure if
I
he'll
don't know
hit.
if desire is his problem. I think he's just getting beat up by bigger guys.
I mean, his talent wise, him and center are best.
Center's a beast. Center is the beast right now.
Yeah. Who's going to be the American to pull through and make a difference this year? Is it going to be Shelton?
I like Shelton. I do like Shelton.
Yeah.
He needs to, if he's watching, which he won't be, he needs to be more aggressive off the ground. He'll be fine. Great
Yeah.
serve, great energy, young, powerful player.
Yeah, he seems to have the competitive level to do it as long as he can get over the hump of
He's
now
feisty.
he's been there.
He's feisty. He's got to just be more aggressive and penetrate. Kind of like center. Center has a very penetrating ground stroke that he just wears people down.
Yeah.
He's the
That's what I
he's
mean.
the
Yeah, the consistency. Alcaraz needs that consistent uh, aggressiveness or desire to want to win. Seems like he's having too much of a good time, which I'm okay with. He's entertaining, but I don't know if he takes it as serious
I don't know.
because
He's won 3 majors. He takes it serious.
yeah. Well, I mean, for the
Three
long run,
majors before 21. It's pretty
did you
good.
see him play Djokovic? You see him play Joker?
Joe Djokovic.
Yeah. It seems like becomes a little too friendly. That's what I kind of got from the last two times they played. The
I
Wimbledon
see what you're
final.
saying. I see what you're saying. He's kind of he seems like, and this is no knock, but he kind of,
Yeah.
he's a sweetheart. He almost seems like on the spectrum a little bit.
Yeah, I love the way he plays with a lot of fun and enjoyment. It's just I
Yeah,
don't know
but
if
but Djokovic is a killer.
that's what I mean, yeah. So I guess he
Djokovic
needs
is
Alcaraz needs a little bit more killer.
Djokovic is a murderer for sure.
Yeah. Good stuff. We'll have
All right, Tim.
we'll talk soon
We'll
about
talk.
I guess the French Open.
Yes, awesome, buddy.
All
Great
right,
talk.
buddy.
But I'll talk to you on the phone soon enough.
All right, thanks so much, John. I really
Yeah,
appreciate your
thanks,
time.
Tim.
Thank you.
All right, see you, buddy.